while I switch this, I'm super nervous about this talk. I used to have 2 reasons, but now I have 3 because why not have more? I've recently found out that this is being live streamed, and unless the Olympics are more popular, my mother may be watching this, so whew, that's gonna be fun. And I'm gonna talk about art to a room of engineers, which is already terrifying enough because I don't know if you're gonna like it. And third of all, as if these weren't enough reasons, I've decided, normally I do my presentations in Keynote, which is like a glorified PDF basically, and nothing can go wrong. And this time, because I wanted iframes, I'm running it on the web, so literally everything can go wrong. So, hold your fingers crossed for us. Hi everyone, I'm Monica. I am Nod Waldorf on Twitter and GitHub and all sorts of internet places, and I work on Polymer. I'll tell you about Polymer later, but it's a library to make web components, and I'll tell you about web components later, because that's why I'm here. But these are the sort of things that I do. So we make apart from a library, I particularly make little pretty material design widgets that you can use in your application, and we try to make them as useful as possible, and you can just drop them into your web apps, and you don't have to be a super strong programmer, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm also an emojineer. It's raining emoji. This is secretly why I wanted to do this on the web, maybe, which means that I pretty much only get excited about emoji, and those, if you haven't seen the make your own emoji cocktail garnish yet, I strongly recommend it. It's the best thing I've seen all week. So I've also recently found these bears. I'm trying to make friends with you right now, so I'm going to show you all sorts of cool things. So there's this dude on Twitter called Punches Bears, and he's making a video game that is allegedly about making bears dance. But in the process of him making this video game, which is not public yet, he's just posting random videos of bears dancing. This one is dancing very excitedly to Shakira, and I decided to spare you the sound because I don't think we can put it on YouTube afterwards. But you can spend about an hour and a half on his Twitter stream, which is just videos of like insane things he's done in Unity. Favorite thing on the internet. Go for it. Look how sassy that bear is. Like, I wasn't worried that bears could dance better than me, but now I really am, and I watch this every week, and I'm like, what can I learn from this bear? Anyway, let's talk about art. So I love drawing and I love painting, and I've been doing it all my life. And I took courses when I was younger, and I took them when I was older. And I'm not one of those like naturally talented people. It turns out artists think you have to work at. And art is really hard. Like, even if you're a Van Gogh or a Picasso or your favorite painter that like woke up and was innocently talented, it's kind of really hard. So this is a painting by Renoir, and it looks really awesome, and it's super famous. And I'm noticing first bug with these presentations, the ratio is all off, and this should have been in line, yay. But even this painting is actually really hard to execute. If you think the drawing part is easy, there's like 100 faces in this crowd. There's all these leaves, there's like these weird lights over here that somebody spent a lot of time painting. This isn't something that you do in a week. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort, and you have to do a lot of sketching and like color analysis and probably stare at people. And I don't know about you, but I don't like staring at people. So it's really hard. And then I've been doing this for a while, and then one Christmas I go home, and my mother, who's never been able to draw like a stick figure in her life, shows me this thing, and she's like, holy shit, Monica, look what I made. I made a sunset or a photo of a dog, or I don't remember. It was like this beautiful painting, and I was like, are you kidding me? I've spent like years trying to like do this, and I can't. And it turns out it was a paint by numbers. And that's the first time I realized that people genuinely enjoy making art, even if they're not good at it, if you help them. She really enjoyed doing this. Somebody drew a beautiful painting, drew a beautiful painting of a sunset and told her what colors to use and gave her the colors and told her where to put the colors. And at the end, you get this amazing slice of pizza that maybe or maybe not I drew. I didn't. I stole it from the internet. But it was really fun, and she really enjoyed it. So that's when I realized that a lot of people want to do this, whether or not you're a Picasso or not. You enjoy making art. And most importantly, you enjoy sharing art with people. She didn't make this amazing painting and put it in the basement and showed it to no one. She showed it like the moment I came in, and she was like, look what I made, isn't it amazing? Because we like sharing art with people. We take Instagram photos and we put weird filters on them and we put them on the internet for everybody to see. There's this new app called Prisma, which basically makes like super fancy paintings out of your photos, and so many people are using it because you get to take something that you've made and make it even better and then show it to people. So this is the thing we enjoy. And the web is really good at sharing. Before the web, sharing things meant that you had to go to somebody's house with all of your paintings in your back, and that was kind of weird, and they probably wouldn't invite you again. But on the web, it's really easy, because sharing, like, I'm sharing this presentation with you. It comes from my amazing domain, meowny.ca. Go check it out. And there's a lot of apps nowadays that help us make art on the internet. So this is something called Make 8-Bit Art by Jen Schiffer. Jen Schiffer is an amazing person that makes a lot of art and tools to make art. But this one's really great because you can draw. It's basically a pixel drawer, and you can like pick different colors. And I can increase the brush size and like do some painting. And I've made garbage here because I spend no time. But if you spend a little bit of time on it, you can make something really fun. This is a selfie that she made of herself in her application. She uses her application to draw a lot of her art in it. And it can be something very easy or it can be something very complicated. And her application has become popular and a lot of people use it and a lot of people will be like, look what I made with Make 8-Bit Art. And then she'll retweet it and everybody likes it and it's fun. It's fun for everyone. She also runs this project called VART, or VART, an institute, in which she used to take, she's discontinued it now because I think people on the internet were jerks, but she basically takes a painter that she respects or has discovered and then re-implements their art in JavaScript. So she has a Matisse generator where like you can draw cutouts out of paper. This one in particular is René Magritte, which is a French painter. He's a surrealist, and he's most notably known for like two photo paintings. One of them is of a businessman wearing a green apple instead of a face, and the other one is a very realistic painting of a pipe, and below it in French the words, "This is not a pipe." And because it isn't, it's a representation of a pipe, but that's the kind of shit he does. And in this application, she basically took a whole bunch of like CSS images and a whole bunch of words and puts them together. And sometimes they make sense. None of them here make sense. This is not the JavaScript. This is not the sky. But sometimes they do, and it's hilarious whether or not they work, because that's what art is about. My friend Juan makes this thing called Megamoji, which is basically also a pixel art generator, but when I discovered it, I was having a super bad day, and I was like, I really want to make something dumb on the internet and like post it on Twitter, and I want Twitter to make me feel better. But I didn't know what to draw. If you go to make a 8-bit pixel art, you have to like know what you want to draw. I want to draw a dog. I want to draw a horse. But the best thing about Megamoji is that you can load an emoji as a background. She's like my emoji partner in crime. And then you can paint also with emoji. So I can make this like emoji out of like, I don't know, the background imp, and then I can put, I don't know, anguished face everywhere. And if I spend a little bit of time, I can actually make this. This is a cat that I did that night, where I was just tracing. And it was very straightforward. It wasn't very hard for me to do. All I just had to pick were like emoji for the background and the foreground. And then I just traced, and it was easy and satisfying, and I produced something. I also made this thing where you can mix patterns. And it's really easy. Patterns are, let's zoom in. I got this book for Christmas, which is a German book from the 60s. And it was basically this artist who was discovering patterns by putting things together. And it's like a book that's printed with ink, like he was drawing all the things. And I thought it was really cool. So I did it in JavaScript. So you can just pick a whole bunch of like different patterns and overlap them. And they end up looking like crazy things sometimes. There you go. Like this one's kind of cute. So I published it, and a whole bunch of people just like made patterns for a day, which I thought was cute. People did art. And all of this was possible because we helped people make art. We didn't just give them a piece of paper and a crappy pen and we're like, go make a masterpiece. We're like, cool, you don't really know how to draw, and you don't really want to spend time learning how to draw. We're just going to give you better tools. We gave you, you know, color by numbers. We gave you things where you can trace and you can make them really fun. And the reason why I'm telling you this story is because I think we can do the same thing about the web. Because the same problem we have with the web, if we look at how we make applications from our HTML building blocks, they're getting a little better over time, but it's still just like divs and blocks and styles, and it's pretty, and they're very simple and like not very abstract. So if you believed me that art is fun if I give you paint by numbers, you should believe me that we can do better for the web too. One of the things that the web is really good at, and has been developing over time, is this idea of semantics. So if you look at like 10 years ago, or like around HTML5 era, so 2005, we didn't have things like header and article. We just had like paragraphs and divs and links and images, and they were cool, but they weren't semantically expressive. And then we came up with things like header and nav and article, which don't look any different, but where they are in the page, you can sort of like read it better in English. The header goes at the top. If you put the header at the bottom, you're kind of a jerk. The nav clearly is going to have navigation links. That's why it's called a nav. In particular, nav is really awesome for voiceover applications, which read it in a particular way. They read it as, this is a link of, this is a set of 8 navigational links versus just a list of 8 links, which is nice. An article, just says, this is where my content goes. It's not the header, it's not the footer, it's where the things go. And it's great because you can now look at somebody else's web page and figure out what they wanted to do versus me just writing a pile of divs, some of them hopefully having a class called header on them, maybe, maybe not, who knows. The web is also really good at encapsulation. We don't actually know how the elements are implemented on the web. We put inputs and we put videos on the page. That bear thing that you were looking at, it's a video element. The little Polymer Elements that I had was a video element. I don't know how the video element works. And that's because it's encapsulated. It's composed of a whole bunch of divs that are just hidden away in a little tiny castle. The browser implements it for you, and it doesn't show you how it works. And you don't need to care how it works. There's a flag in Chrome that you can enable. It's called Enable User Agent Shadow Styles or Shadow Roots. I always forget what it's called because I always have it on. And then you can actually expand when you inspect an input in the DevTools. You can actually expand and see what it's actually made out of. A plain input is basically a div that is content editable. Something more complicated, like an input type equals number, which is a basic text input that has like this little flipper that goes up and down to increase the number, has a whole bunch of divs inside. And what's interesting is, oh, this is an image, silly me. It's this div over here that has an ID called spin. Spin is a really generic ID. If this wasn't encapsulated, and if I had, let's say, an application that was a Wheel of Fortune application, I had a button called spin, and I wanted to put an ID called spin on it. If this wasn't encapsulated, that would like break everything in that page because now I had 2 buttons with an ID called spin. But this spin lives over here in the shadow root, in the little castle around inputs code. And the IDs don't go out, the styles don't go out. Encapsulation is a win in every other language that isn't JavaScript. Video is actually a really complicated element, turns out. You can inspect it. It's got like 8 different buttons for all the controls, a whole bunch of divs, a whole bunch of styles, and you can inspect all of the styles. And when I see these pseudos, these start to make sense because when you want to style these inputs, you usually have these like weird pseudo selectors. It goes : and then dash webkit in the thing, or like dash moz in a thing. And this is where they come from. This basically says that if you want to style this div, you've got a pseudo selector for it. So inspecting things in the browser is kind of cool. So that's encapsulation, and we've had it, and it's really good. We know it's good because we enjoy using input and video as much as we can enjoy using input. But if we put them together, we should get something amazing like an emoji brush, which is semantically expressive. It's a brush that lets you paint with emoji, and it's encapsulated because God help you, you don't want to know how I've implemented an emoji brush. You just want to put it on your website and like let you draw with emoji. And that's what web components are about. They basically take these powers that the web already has, the web already knows how to do encapsulation and already knows how to do semantics, and gives them to you developers so that you can make elements like input and video and give them to other people. You don't have to wait for the browser to make an emoji brush, because as much as I sit next to the Blink team, they will never ship you an emoji brush. I promise you. I've been trying so hard. They don't even want to ship Blink, like the tag Blink. So this is what web components are about, and this is why I'm excited, because I want to make elements for people that they can use in their application, so that you don't have to do all the work. I can do a lot of the heavy lifting for you as an element designer, and you can have like an easier and better time making applications. So the reason why I was nervous about this talk is because I hate using other people's frameworks and libraries, so I didn't want to use Reveal because I don't really know. It has like all these flashy animations, so I was like, I'm procrastinating. I'll make my own framework. It's fine. So I made this set of custom elements. A-presentation is basically the entire presentation, and in it I've put a whole bunch of slides, and the element is called A-slide, and they have like titles and subtitles. This particular piece of code produces this exact slide. I just copy-pasted it into the next line. And this works really well for me because all I wanted was like big text on a slide. That's cool. But let's look at this element. So I've made it with Polymer, and this is where Polymer becomes important. Polymer is a library that helps you write web components. Because right now, writing web components is basically like a pile of JavaScript, and you have to write your DOM, what your thing actually looks like in JavaScript, and your styles in JavaScript, and I don't really like that. I like to write my HTML in HTML and my styles in CSS. And Polymer lets you do that. It lets you define what your element looks like in the language that your element in HTML and CSS, and then how your element behaves in JavaScript, because that's what those languages are made for. So I don't really want to show you a whole bunch of code, so this is going to be like 2 seconds. If you wanted to define something like a slide element, you can give it the styles, and then you can give it, the style should actually be in the template if any of my team members are watching this, that's a typo. And then you give it a template, which is like what the element actually looks like. So in particular, all my slides have this div that's a wrapper around it, because I want to have some padding. And then the style is the fact that like all of them are 100 VH and 100 VW. And then there's something here called a content selector, which basically means if I pass you anything that has a class title, displayed in that place. And in my slides, I have a content selector for pre-title and subtitle, so that it always goes pre-title at the top, subtitle in the middle, title in the middle, subtitle at the bottom. No matter what order I define these in my page, they always like get displayed in the correct order. And then there's like a little bit of code. This element, the slide, doesn't actually have any JavaScript. It just looks pretty. But all the JavaScript that's written, which is like super simple, it's like 100 lines of code, it's in the presentation, which needs, for example, a current slide. It's just an object, and it needs to know what the current slide that we're looking at is. Because, for example, I'm showing it here in the URL, so that if you want to link to a particular slide, you can. And it runs a little bit of code when you first attach it in the DOM. It counts how many slides it has so that it knows not to go past the last slide. And then it has functions. What does it mean to go to the next slide? Well, it means like hiding this one and sliding the other one in. Just things like that. Like that's the behavior of the presentation. And that's it. That's how you make custom elements. They're just a thing that looks like something, and then it has a behavior. That's a custom element. But back to the art. So if you believe me that we make art with brushes, we make art with our hands, and we paint, and then we have like these better tools, like paint by numbers, or make 8-bit art, or make emoji. We make applications out of components. And the better their components are, the better their applications are. So I wanted to tell you about how I would build an app out of these components, but I really didn't want to show you any code because you would fall asleep in a second. So I built an app for you. It's called Emojillate, and it basically lets you take, obviously it has emoji, and it basically lets you load an image, and then it pixelates it. And then if I zoom in over here, all the pixels are emoji. So there's a whole bunch of like these blue dots, and there are some clouds over here. And it's meowny.ca/emojillate. Go home and have fun. And you can create a gist out of it. So you can actually open this in a new tab. It looks terrible because I've accepted a patch that does this. But if you look at the actual code, there's my dinosaur. He's real cute, hanging out. That's the Polymer mascot right now. So that's cute. So how did I build this? So I'm going to use these like lemons as the image. I got really excited one week and I decided to learn Illustrator, and I drew these lemons and pretty much stopped because it turns out I don't have time for that. But anywho, so what did we build this out of? Well, I loaded an image. The only way I can load an image, even though web components are super strong, it's still an input type equals file that I made really pretty. So I have an input type equals file. And then I have my emojillate element. And this is a custom element, and it's the one that does all the magic. It takes in the file contents and then like works on them for a little bit and spits out a grid of emoji. It's a superhero. But I also have something called a paper slider. So I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. A paper slider is, paper means that it's been made by Polymer and looks like material design. And it's like actually pretty, unlike the input type equals range, which is one of the ugliest and least stylable elements I've seen in my life. But it's a resolution slider, so I didn't show you this on the previous page. I wonder if I can do it still. Yeah! There's a resolution slider, so if I have, it just means how many pixels you have on a width. So if you have like no pixels at all, it looks really chunky. If you have a ton of pixels, it looks really not chunky, it looks badass. There's also a checkbox here for the background. So right now I'm actually maintaining the background of the image because it looks prettier. But if I hide it, it's just like literally what the text would look like. Still a dinosaur. So yeah, that's what That's what the slider does, and that's what the checkbox does. So there's these two custom elements that I did not build. I took them from somebody else. That's actually lying because I did build one of them, but not part of this application. But yeah, so somebody like made these elements, and I was like, I need you in my application. And they all work together. So when I showed you all of the things that were making, that I was moving, if you look at the emojillate element, so the grid that does all the work, it gets affected by what file I've loaded and what configurations I've done. So every time I change the input or every time I change the configurations, we need to like rejiggle this emojillate element to do its work. And in Polymer, this is really easy because we have this idea of data bindings, which isn't new by any chance. I think I've discovered it like 10 years ago in Backbone the first time. But it's something that's really awesome because it's, again, somebody else doing all the heavy lifting for you and you getting benefit for free. So if you look at our emojillate element over here, let's say it has two attributes, file and resolution. And file is like the thing that you've loaded. And I have an input, that type equals file, and then I can create this like property that's common between them, a variable. And it's called SomeFile. So SomeFile comes from the input and goes into emojillate. And if SomeFile changes, emojillate instantly knows about it because that's how data bindings work. That event gets propagated everywhere in the app, and everyone that cares about changes to that element get notified. So this is very easy I don't have to set up all these listeners and observers and like click handlers. When I change the file, I need to like go to this element and know which function to call. It just works by magic. It's not actually magic. And that's how the paper slider works too. It has a value property, which is like the number that I've slid through. And I just pass it on to emojillate as the resolution. And if that one changes, emojillate's like, aha, the resolution changed. I need to redraw my shit. And that's how the checkbox works too. It has a Boolean that turns on and off, and the background turns on and off. And that's it. And when I say that's it, I mean this is literally all the code on that index page. I have a whole bunch of things in my head, which are basically load the polyfill so that this works on all the browsers, load these two elements that I told you I didn't make, load the emojillate element that I made. That's all I have to do. Then here are my elements that I put on the page. This is the emojillate element, and you can see that I've actually used bindings. I wasn't lying to you. That's what I did. And then I have 4 lines of code. I did lie to you when I told you that you can just bind the file. You can't because input type equals file isn't nice. You need to listen to an event and get the target file, whatever. But that's it. That's all the code. That's how that application works. And there's a bunch of logic in emojillate to do the emojillation, which I'll tell you about in a second. But if you just wanted to embed this in your, I don't know, application, I don't know why you wouldn't want an emojilator in your application. But if you did, this is literally all the code that you have to write. And that's kind of awesome. This is very easy for you to do. Back to the art. So it's called emojilator because it pixelates and it makes emojillate. It was 2 in the morning when I came up with that, so proud. So how does this actually work? Because I think how it actually emojulates is kind of interesting. So I'm going to tell you about it, whether you want it or not, really. So the first thing that I had to do was decide whether I wanted canvases or spans, because pixelating things on a canvas is really easy with the HTML5 canvas, but I really wanted to make spans because spans are copy-pastable. They're just text, right? You can always select them. And the reason why this was important is that all of you can copy your art and put it in your team Slack channel, because why wouldn't your team members appreciate this? This is a Voltron logo that my coworker pasted because we like Voltron. Pew, 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 defender of the universe. So spans were clearly the winner here because we wanted text. Amazing. So how do we emojillate? The first thing we do is I loaded a file. We obviously have to start with that because you have to load a file from the user and you have to put it somewhere, but you don't want to show it. So, you render it into a hidden image somewhere on the page, doesn't matter where. And then you measure it. You want to find out its ratio because eventually you're going to be painting it on this canvas that you've created that has a fixed width. So you're going to need to adjust its height so that your image isn't warped. And then we're going to resize the canvas, which is going to be great. And then we're going to pixelate it. So this is the interesting part, and this is also the simple part. So when you send somebody an image, but you sent it way too small, and they increase it and want to print it. Remember that logo that Peter was showing you before and was super pixelated, and he was like, Monica was going to tell you about the art? It's what we call a potato, and it happens because you download a very small image, and you're stretching it out, and it looks terrible. And that's exactly what we use to pixelate on a canvas. We're basically going to take our hidden image, and paint it really small to like 1 over the resolution of the size that we wanted, and then repaint it to the original size of the canvas, and you're going to lose all your pixels, and it's going to look terrible, but we want that. So we pixelated it. And if we were going to use canvas, I could have stopped here, right? I've pixelated something, but we're not. We're going to put it into spans. So then we're going to take this like hideous canvas that we've made, and we're going to split it into like megapixels, which are, because the canvas actually has something like, I don't know, 3,000 pixels, right? It's a giant thing. But you want only 60 pixels, because that was the resolution that we were using. In this case, the resolution would be 8, and it would look terrible at the end, but bear with me. So the resolution is 8, so we make a grid of like 8 on the width and whatever, however many fit in the height. And then we go through all of these like megapixels, chunks of pixels, and we take the average color. In this case, it's a beautiful egg yellow white. I've seen walls of this color. And then you pick an emoji that's that color. That's the closest to that color. And here is where I wrote terrible code, and if anybody knows anything about graphics, please send me PRs, because I assume the RGB space is linear. It isn't. So I take the average color, and then I average all the emoji, and I pick the one with the smallest distance. That's incorrect. That's not how RGB works. You need to convert it to like lab or something, and I didn't. But anywho, I come up with like a close enough emoji. So sort of yellowish, princess is yellow, cool. And then you move to the next megapixel, and then you do it again, and you're like, oh, still princess. And then you keep doing this for all of the pixels that you're trying to display in your spans. And at this point, you're converting them into spans, right? So you are doing it on the canvas, and then for every one of these like megapixels, you create a span. And then you add them to a giant container, and then you get this when you're done. You basically have a whole list of emoji. This is the dev tools telling you I'm not lying. It's a span. And if you see them here zoomed in, as the color is changing, the actual emoji changes. Sometimes not super correct, because again, really terrible code. And it's text, so you can select it, and you can make a gist out of it. So these are actually the lemons. Because the font isn't monospaced correctly, it's like stretched and not a square. But there you go, it's text. And then you can send it to your Slack channel, and everybody will be delighted about this, I promise you. Cool. So we've now made this web component. We've made emojillate that makes art really easily. Anybody can upload a file, and it's going to get art out of it, and you can share it. So we've made a better brush for the internet, and it's amazing. So now I'm going to tell you about better brushes that we've already made. And these are apps that people have made with web components. So this is my coworker Chris, and he makes really hilarious things. And this is something called an emoji word art. So this is a combination of 4 elements. There are these emoji pickers, basically, which are drop-downs that let you select an emoji. And he didn't write them, I did, but that doesn't matter. And then we're going to pick a lemon over here. And then this is something called a paper input, which is a really fancy input. And I'm going to write SFHTML5 is not going to fit. Let's just write HTML. And then it makes Word out of it, like it's 2001 all over again. So it takes a foreground emoji, which was the yellow one, and a background one, and it assembles an art. And this, again, is an element. It's called word art. You can put it anywhere you want, like in this presentation, or when you ask a user to type their name. You can just do this as a joke on the side. Who wouldn't appreciate that? We also have something called Meetscope. So I had to open this in a new tab, because it keeps my camera on, and I was really paranoid. So this is, oh, sweet. So this is, does anybody know what Meetspace is? Yeah, so Meetspace is this hilarious chat where it's like a public chat, anybody can be on it, but when you send a message, it takes a GIF of your face at that time, so you make like a little 5-second GIF. So Meetscope is kind of like that. So we're gonna make a GIF, it's a little long. So all of these are web components. This button is a web component. Over here I have settings, and these are called paper icon buttons. They're things that Polymer vends. He didn't make them, he just like assembled them. He just took building blocks like Lego and made an application. And then here in the background, my GIF has been processing. Look, I've tested this for a while. And then it makes a sped up GIF of yourself, and you can flip it up and down, and it can make it like go in both directions and reverse it. And this was awesome. We make these things just to like piss off one of our coworkers who really hates GIFs. So it turns out that if you're doing performance testing on Polymer and Elements, and your Slack is filled with GIFs and animated shit, your computer gets slower and your results get skewed. So Kevin goes, can you please stop sending GIFs, which makes us make applications that make more GIFs. Thank you, Chris. So anywho, this is what Meetscope is, and it's amazing. It's all made out of web components, and there's a lot of like super awesome web components in there. There's something called, I'm just gonna leave this on for the rest of the talk now. There's something called, there's like a Firebase storage, which like stores things in the background. Because when I showed you, these are all the GIFs that I've ever made in this profile, and they're not, they're saved here, and they get loaded and like reassembled. I can open a new tab, and they're still there. So yeah, this is Meetscope. It's amazing. It's meetscope.camera. Strongly recommend. One of my favorite apps to date. Oh, and it's a PWA, so it works offline too. Service workers, it's amazing. Why wouldn't you want to make offline GIFs? So that's it. I want you to go home and get excited about web components, because I want you to like make dumb tools for people to make art and for people to share art, because I think this is really fun and it's going to make the web better, or at least definitely more entertaining. So that's it. Thank you so much.